Layla Okafor scored 196 points on Family Feud Fast Money, 4 points short of the $20,000 prize. When the final buzzer sounded, she didn't react the way contestants usually react. She didn't slump. She didn't groan. She stood completely still, one hand on the podium, and her 9-year-old sister, Amara, watching from the family section 10 feet away, said 4 words into the quiet that followed. "Mama, she's going to faint." Steve Harvey heard it. He looked at Layla, really looked, and what he saw, the pale ring around her lips, the white-knuckle grip on the podium, the careful stillness of a person who has learned to stand very still so nobody asks how they are, made him set his host cards down and walk toward her without saying a word. When he got close enough, he asked one question. Not into the microphone, just to her, quietly, one person to another. "When did you last eat?" Layla Okafor looked at him for 3 seconds. Then she said, 10 days ago. The studio fell completely silent, and Steve Harvey, in the 46-year history of that show, did something no host had ever done in the middle of a taping. He sat down on the stage floor next to her and stayed there until she told him everything. It was a Monday afternoon, September 23, 2019, at the Trilith Studios complex in Atlanta, Georgia. The Okafor family from Baltimore, Maryland, had driven 11 hours in a borrowed minivan. There were 5 of them: Layla, 24, her mother Grace, 49, her younger sisters Amara, 9, and Joy, 14, and their neighbor Mrs. Patterson, 61, who had come because Grace had asked her to, and because Mrs. Patterson had known for 3 weeks that something was deeply wrong with this family, and had been waiting, in the patient way of older women who have seen hard things, for the moment when she could be useful. They were playing against the Fletcher family from Charlotte, North Carolina, a cheerful, athletic family who had been loud on the buzzer since the opening round. The Okafors had kept up well. Layla was sharp, quick to buzz, quick with answers, carrying her team the way oldest daughters carry things, without being asked and without stopping. She had smiled at Steve's jokes. She had laughed in the right places. She had worn a red blouse because it was her mother's favorite color, and she had thought, if we are going to do this, let's look like we deserve to win. Nobody watching from the bleachers would have suspected anything. Nobody in that studio knew what she was carrying. But the real story hadn't even started yet. 10 days before the taping, Layla Okafor had eaten her last meal. It had been half a peanut butter sandwich, split with Amara, at 7:30 in the evening on a Tuesday. She had told Amara it was a game, who could eat slower, and Amara had believed her because Amara was 9, and because her big sister had always made hard things feel like games. The truth was not a game. The truth was this: their landlord had changed the lease terms in August without notice, raising the monthly rent from $940 to $340 on 30 days' warning. Grace, who worked 2 jobs, a daytime shift at a dry cleaning facility and a night shift cleaning office buildings, had not been able to cover the gap. She had tried. She had applied for emergency rental assistance through Baltimore City's Housing Authority and been told the processing time was 45 to 60 business days. She had applied through 2 nonprofit agencies and been placed on waiting lists. The first nonprofit had said 8 weeks minimum. The second had said they were not currently accepting new applications. She had called the landlord. He had said the rent was what the rent was. By September, Grace Okafor was $1,200 behind. She had received a notice to quit. She had 14 days. She had not told Layla how bad it was. But Layla was 24 years old and lived in the same apartment, and she could read a utility notice and a rent statement and the particular expression on her mother's face at 11 p.m. when Grace came home from the office cleaning shift and thought everyone was asleep. Layla was not asleep. She lay in the room she shared with Joy and listened to her mother sit at the kitchen table and do math that didn't add up. And she made a decision. She stopped eating. Not because there was no food. Grace made sure there was food. Made sure Amara had breakfast and Joy had a lunch she could take to school. Made sure the refrigerator looked less empty than it was whenever she sensed Layla looking. But Layla understood subtraction. Every meal she didn't eat was $4 they still had. Every $4 was closer to the $1,200. She told her mother she had been having stomach issues. She told Joy she was on a health kick. She told Amara it was a game. She had been at it for 10 days before the taping. She had hidden it from all of them. She had almost hidden it from the studio. The Family Feud application had been submitted 6 months earlier, in a different life, before the lease change, before the notice to quit, before the 10 days. Grace had applied on a Wednesday evening after watching an episode and saying, half joking, that they should try out. Layla had helped her submit the form. They had both forgotten about it until the acceptance letter arrived in August, 3 days after the rent increase. Layla had looked at the letter for a long time. Then she had called the production office and confirmed the date. Then she had told the family it was going to be fine. What she had not told them was that the $20,000 prize would cover the $1,200 arrears and every month of rent for the next 14 months. She had done the math. She had done it many times. She had lain in the room she shared with Joy, 9 nights in a row, not sleeping, doing the math. The math was the only thing that was holding her together. And then the buzzer had sounded at 196 points, 4 short. The audience thought that was the emotional peak. They were wrong. Steve Harvey sat down on the stage floor beside her. He sat down the way you sit when sitting is an act of commitment, not perched, not hovering, properly down, legs crossed, suit and all, on the Family Feud stage floor. He looked up at Layla. 10 days, he said quietly. Tell me. Layla looked at her mother. Grace was watching from the family section with an expression that was still assembling itself. She had not known, not fully, not the 10 days part. She had suspected. She had not known. Layla looked back at Steve Harvey, a man she had met 40 minutes ago, sitting on a television stage floor in an expensive suit, looking at her with the eyes of someone who was not going anywhere until she answered, and she told him. She told him about the lease, about the $400 increase, about the 14-day notice, about the emergency assistance application that had a 60-business-day processing time and 14 days was not 60. She told him about the peanut butter sandwich she had split with Amara and the game she had invented to explain why she was eating half. She told him about the math she had been doing in the dark, in the room she shared with Joy, 9 nights in a row. She did not tell him in a dramatic voice. She told him in the same steady, matter-of-fact voice she had used all afternoon, the voice of someone who has organized a crisis into manageable pieces and is simply presenting the pieces. But her hands, which had been still on the podium, were now pressed flat against her thighs, and they were shaking slightly, and Steve Harvey looked at the shaking hands and then looked at her face and said, in the quietest voice he had used on that stage in 15 years, "Stop everything." He stood up. He looked at the production desk. "Stop the game. We are done playing today. But we are not done here." A producer moved forward from behind the curtain. Steve held up one hand without looking at her. The producer stopped. He turned to Layla. "You drove 11 hours, he said, in a borrowed van, after 10 days without eating. to try to win rent money for your family on a game show because every other door was closed. He paused. I know what it feels like when every door is closed. I lived in a parking lot for 3 years. I know what it feels like to do the math in the dark. And I know what it feels like to still show up. So I need you to hear me. Showing up in this room today, that was not nothing. That was everything. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. The audience stirred the way they always stir when a host does something hosts never do during tapings. He called his foundation's housing coordinator. On speaker, he held the phone to the studio microphone. Judith, I need a full emergency rental assistance payment issued today. Baltimore, Maryland, Grace Okafor. $1,200 current arrears, and I want 6 months of forward rent covered. That is 6 months of $1,400. Can you do that? A pause. Done, Steve, he hung up. The studio fell completely silent. 300 people were not breathing. He wasn't finished. He looked at Layla. You said you've been doing this for 10 days because you were trying to protect your family. I want you to understand that what you just did, sitting in that chair, telling me the truth, stopping the performance, that is also protecting your family. Because your family needs you. And you cannot be there for them if you disappear. He walked to the stage manager and asked for water and food from the green room. It arrived in 90 seconds. A bottle of water, crackers, a granola bar, whatever was back there. And Steve Harvey carried it himself to Layla Okafor and set it on the podium in front of her and stood there while she ate the first thing she had eaten in 10 days. The crew behind the curtain stopped working. A lighting technician, 22 years in the business, put her hand over her mouth. The sound engineer set down his headset. 300 audience members watched a young woman eat crackers on a game show stage and understood, without being told, that this was the most important thing they had seen on television in years. He was not done. He turned to the Fletcher family across the stage. Their team captain, Marcus Fletcher, 41, was already shaking his head before Steve looked at him. Both families, Marcus said. Obviously, Steve turned to the audience. Both families go home today with the full $20,000 prize. Because Layla Okafor drove 11 hours in a borrowed van and played 6 rounds of Family Feud without eating for 10 days and still scored 196 points. That deserves every dollar in this building. Layla Okafor's mother, Grace, crossed the stage. She put her arms around her daughter from behind, around her shoulders, and she held her there, and 9-year-old Amara ran across the stage too, and put her arms around both of them from the front, and Joy came after, and Mrs. Patterson stood at the edge of the stage with both hands pressed together under her chin, and the whole thing was quiet and real and had nothing to do with television. The episode aired November 12, 2019. Within 24 hours, the clip had 72 million views. Within 6 weeks, 240 million. The hashtag 196 points trended globally for 11 days. It was the most shared clip from any game show in the history of that platform year. It was referenced in 3 congressional speeches on food insecurity and emergency housing policy. A food bank in Baltimore named its new mobile delivery van the Layla after the clip aired, and donations to the organization spiked 400% in the 2 weeks following. 3 months after the taping, Grace Okafor's rental situation had been fully stabilized. The Harvey Foundation's 6-month forward payment had bought the family enough time to access a permanent housing assistance program through a Baltimore nonprofit. They moved into a new apartment, larger, same neighborhood, stable lease, in January 2020. 6 months after the taping, Layla Okafor completed her nursing assistant certification, something she had deferred twice because of money. She was working at a Baltimore pediatric clinic by March. A year after the taping, Steve Harvey mentioned Layla in a food insecurity awareness speech he gave in Washington, D.C. He said, "She drove 11 hours and played 6 rounds of a game show on an empty stomach and scored 196 points. I want you to understand what that required. I want you to understand what was holding that person together. It was love, not for herself, for the people behind her." He paused. That kind of love deserves a door that opens, not a waiting list. Today, the Layla Fund, a Harvey Foundation program seeded from that taping, provides emergency food and rental assistance to families in crisis across Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. With a guaranteed 48-hour response time, no processing delay. The fund's motto is taken directly from what Layla said to Steve when he asked what she was thinking while she drove 11 hours. "I just thought, if I get there, maybe something opens." To date, the Layla Fund has served 3,100 families. Amara Okafor is 12 now. She knows the full story her mother told her on her 10th birthday, the year after the taping, sitting at the kitchen table of the new apartment. Amara listened without interrupting. When her mother was finished, Amara said, "So Layla did all that for us?" Grace said yes. Amara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm going to do something like that for somebody someday." Grace said, "I know you will. She will." The Okafor family produces that kind of person. They always have. Some people show up with nothing left in them because the people they love are waiting on the other side of the showing up. Layla Okafor drove 11 hours and played 6 rounds of Family Feud and scored 196 points and stood at a podium and held on. And a man sitting on a stage floor asked her one question, and the answer changed everything. All she had to do was tell the truth. All she had to do was let someone in. That is the hardest thing some people ever do. That is also sometimes the thing that saves everything. If this story about Layla's 10 days and what opened up when she finally told the truth moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to know that asking for help is not weakness. Have you ever held something alone for too long before letting someone in? Let us know in the comments. And ring that notification bell for more moments that restore your faith in what people are willing to do for the people they love.